Hi everyone, this is Vikas. This time of year, especially at the fag end of December, I often reflect upon what we've experienced in any past year. And this year is exceptional in the sense of we've had this carnage that's taken place all over the world. It's brought everyone to their knees, and it's really put into question how we function and how we think about things. And so over the last few months, I brought my friends on to this live stream to talk about various aspects, either of their work or to give us insights. I know that a large number of us are in the education sector, so teachers, school leaders, and leaders actually across the sector, and not just in schools, including NGOs. That's why I was keen to invite two of my friends, and they are Aashti Zaidi and Boris Bulayev, from different organizations here with me. Welcome, guys, to this call, to this live stream.
Really nice to be here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
No, you two have actually, your work has stood out in this period for the roles that you've played. And Boris, just before we went live, we were saying that there's not many Borises in popular culture today, apart from Boris Johnson and Boris Becker. And the other one is Boris Bulayev. And so, Boris, you're the co-founder and CEO of an incredible NGO called Educate. Do you want to speak a little bit about your work, and then we'll get into questions about, well, what is it that you've learned? How do you think about leadership in these times? And obviously, we want to have a conversation with Aashti about, well, what do we see going forward for the following year? So please, over to you. Tell us more about your work.
Sure, and a huge honor to be here again. So Educate works to prepare youth in Africa with the skills to succeed in today's economy. Right now we work in Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya. And our goal is to design solutions that measurably impact millions of youth per year. We exist because we see a huge growing population of youth in Africa, which can be a huge opportunity. The reality that most youth are expected to work in the informal sector, so 85% plus youth are projected to work in the informal sector, and kind of the space of secondary education or high school is the only real kind of infrastructure to reach youth at scale. And so we've created a 100-hour, what we think of as a broadly 100-hour experience with the most essential skills youth need in a post-primary or secondary level education. And we look to distribute it in different ways. We started, the first way that we started is by bringing it directly to schools. The second way...
Someone's calling you, Boris.
Yes. What an online moment. So the first way is we bring it directly to schools. It's my mom, too. She wants to see my 18-month-old daughter. So we started by bringing that model directly to schools. We reach almost around 25% of secondary schools in Uganda. Since 2012, we've been working to integrate that into national education systems, which we've done in Uganda in a big way in Rwanda, and setting up to do so in Kenya. And the third way, which is a newer way that we're starting to work, is how to bring that to out-of-school youth, and really trying to think about how, in at least in East African context, 50% plus of youth don't actually get to attend secondary school, and which we think is a huge injustice. And so I want to think about, could we build alternative options for youth who can't afford academic secondary, so that every student gets some form of post-primary education, even if they can't access traditional high school?
Boris, that's a great overview. Tell us, in terms of, let's get tangible in that. Tell us what you actually do in prime or in secondary education in Uganda, as an example. Give us some examples of things that happen on the ground.
Yeah, so we partner with schools. Schools actually pay anywhere from $50 to $150 per year. And we deliver a skills course focused on leadership, entrepreneurship, workforce readiness to 40 students per school. It's delivered through a youth mentor who's generally a graduate of our program. We have about 330 youth mentors in Uganda. That mentor leads a business club, which is open to the entire school. And kind of through that, and there's a new batch of 40 students every year. So students kind of throughout the whole school can join the business club. They then enter kind of the intensive skills course. And throughout it,
That's your mum. Say hello to her. I'm going to go to Ash. I'm going to go. Are you okay to answer this?
Oh yeah, and so it's broadly kind of students build leadership skills at the beginning, kind of understanding themselves, their passions, their strengths. There's a big push towards kind of starting businesses together in a group, so you can do it in a safe environment. And towards the end, there's a big push to what we call back home projects. How do you put it into action through either some sort of community action or a business back home? Ultimately, so that you are able, so school is a safe place to practice all the skills you'll need after school in a safe, supportive environment.
Great, thanks for that. Aashti, I want to come to you. So you are the executive director of the Global Schools Forum. Please tell us a little bit about the forum, as well as what brought you into existence, because you're the founder of this association. Please share with us.
Thanks so much, Vikas. Yeah, so I set Global Schools Forum up about 3.5 years ago to respond to sort of what we're seeing as a tremendous kind of growth of non-state education across South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and South America. The sector is growing, but it's very fragmented, and there was no global organization that was bringing together the actors that are working so passionately to provide education to children from low-income families. So GSF was set up in an effort to bring those players together and to provide them opportunities to collaborate, to share best practice, to creatively problem solve some of the challenges that they face on the front lines.
I just want to dig into this a little bit in terms of, prior to this, did you come from the non-state education sector yourself?
Yeah, so actually, this is my first sort of entrepreneurial venture, I suppose. I came to set up GSF after working before that at SIF, which is a private family foundation. And the focus of SIF was on improving the outcomes for the world's youngest children. Yep. And so I was part of a team focused on early childhood education, which, as you know, Vikas, is primarily provided via private provision. So through that work, met a lot of really amazing entrepreneurs that are doing work on the ground to provide early childhood education. And directly before that, I was managing the education program for DFID, now FCDO, in India. And we were, supporting these huge government primary and secondary education programs. Yet, all the while, government data was showing that enrollments in government schools in India have been on a decline year on year, and more children are entering into the private or non-state sector, to the point now that 47% of kids in India, where I'm from, are in private schooling. So there's this huge sector, it's incredibly fragmented, but no one really is talking about it, and no one's trying to bring together the players, and that's what GSF really aims to do.
And so why do you think, actually, I have to ask you this question, so why do you think parents and students are actually making that active choice to actually pay from their pocket as opposed to go to free at the point of use schools that the state provides?
Yeah, I mean, the evidence shows that, there's mixed evidence around actual kind of learning outcomes in private schools being better than public schools. We know that there's an immense challenge across both private and public sectors to deliver quality education, and in particular to deliver learning outcomes to kids. But for what it's worth, when you speak to parents on the ground, they are choosing these schools, and as you said, choosing to pay a pretty significant proportion of their salary to send these kids to school in some instances. And the reason for that is, there's a couple of reasons. The first is that there is a perception, whether rightly or wrongly, that the quality of education in those schools is better than what their child would receive in a state or a government school. The second thing that we hear is that parents believe that they have greater accountability if they're paying a fee, even if it could be a minuscule fee, to a school, as opposed to with the state system, they really feel like they have no power, voice, agency over what is actually happening in that school. The third issue is that, oftentimes there's a huge amount of teacher absenteeism in government schools. And there's a perception from parents who believe so strongly in the power of education to, improve their outcomes and the outcomes of their children, that they would receive that in a private or non-state school and not in a government school.
And so thank you for that. And there's many tangents that we could take on all of that stuff. But I actually want to focus us back on, given the pandemic, what you've seen in the non-state sector, as it were, in education, because we hear obviously it's been catastrophic, right? On any level. And so tell us, in terms of from your member organizations, what is it that they've told you, how they've dealt with it? What are the great shining lessons that you've learned that may inspire us, that there may be a silver lining to all of this?
Yeah, so, the second we sort of, back in March when, the pandemic was in its early days, we sort of pivoted our offer to 100% virtual. And we basically said, actually, we're not just going to make anything that we do just available for GSF members. So we have 60 members across 46 countries. But during this time, we've made our offer available to anyone that wants to, avail of it. And first, we started with a survey of our members to understand what the challenges were. So the first issue was really around the safety of students and staff. And that was both around, obviously, the immediate health needs that they're seeing in communities, but also around kind of increased vulnerabilities of children in their communities as a result of the pandemic, just around safeguarding and child protection. So that was probably the first issue that we heard about. The second, obviously, was around continuity of learning, and how to deliver continued engagement and learning in a no-tech or low-tech environment. So most of our members had to pivot their offer, and they had to rely on either paper-based education, or really low-tech radio instruction, WhatsApp text messages, because using all the sort of tech alternatives was really not a reality for many of our members. So continuity of instruction, and then how to support their teachers with these new roles that they had to play was part and parcel of that. And then finally, Vikas, just really business continuity for our members that derive their kind of survival through the collection of fees. And also those that are reliant on grant philanthropy. It has been an extremely challenging time. So the whole question of financial sustainability and survival has been also one of the big things that we've been hearing about. And we've seen our members respond to all three of these issues with, ingenuity, innovation, a sense of collaboration and partnership. And I'm really happy to provide some examples as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Boris, it comes to your work. You're also a not-for-profit, which is doing some incredible work. What has been the impact of the pandemic on you in terms of what you deliver in schools, given, for example, in Kenya, schools haven't been meeting, haven't been taking place. I don't know what impact on your revenues in terms of not just from the school side of things, but also the grants that you receive from philanthropy. What has been the impact of all of this on an organization like yours?
Yeah, so I think for us, COVID effectively put us out of business because we do in-person delivery, and we were primarily working with schools, either directly to schools or through the education system, as we're doing in Rwanda. We've kind of have a smaller operation serving out-of-school youth, and our method of delivery was in person. So we were effectively put out of business. I think we tried to really embrace that from the beginning. So like from mid-March when schools shut down, we just tried to kind of just embrace that we were out of business. And so kind of three principles that really drove our response is, one, just kind of accepting the now and not scenario planning for the future. So we are out of business. We don't have any way to do what kind of the core thing that we do. And so we're not going to kind of plan for a return back to normal. We're just going to embrace this and figure out how do we get back to serving youth as quickly as possible. Two, and I think this, I don't know if we had this I don't think we had this clarity at the beginning, but kind of the mantra that kind of emerged over time is, how do we leverage the opportunities of COVID to most advance our long-term strategy? It's been really a driving kind of way to think about what we do. And the third has been to really, because we're starting from scratch, we also have to kind of reorganize and start from scratch. So all our ways of working were built to operate at scale. We were kind of at the time the biggest youth skills provider in East Africa. We served 46,000 youth intensively last year. And so we had to restart. And so we actually organized into startup teams that were just trying to build like different ways to serve youth. And so we threw a lot of things at the wall. We tried, we now have a kind of radio and SMS program across Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya. We've got like 80,000 contacts in Uganda. Now we did WhatsApp, we did kind of robocalls. We tried to do WhatsApp teacher groups. We just a bunch of stuff, and teams really organized themselves to do that. Something exciting, we just got actually kind of initial validation of impact of a model we created. And so after about kind of 5 months of throwing a bunch of things at the wall, in September, October, we actually ran a 6-week phone-based boot camp for 3,000 students. And so this is not internet enabled. It's effectively a conference call experience. We had 2 tracks: small space farming, because a lot of students are just at home, and small scale manufacturing, which is doing things like making liquid soap. And we had 3 levels. So it was gamified. Kind of the first level was starting a community action. The second was making a business plan and doing customer survey. And the third was making your own sale. Some really interesting innovations around how our team kind of marketed this all, and just the stickiness of it. And we had about 1,500 students finish the boot camp in October, and we did a pre and post evaluation, saw big increases in, I think, over a doubling in those with a business, 77% increase in those that were making money, more were saving, the increase in skills like grit and goal setting. And so this was like really exciting, because we actually, if you peel out at its core, we actually figured out a new method of delivery. So like you could think of that as like group-based phone mentorship is actually a method of delivery. And it has, I think it's huge for us, because like there's lots of different applications for it, separate from like the specific model that we ran, which we're currently scaling up to 10,000 students. But you could even imagine that perhaps the national education system has a call center staffed by youth who've like finished, who are mentoring other youth, right? Which could be a much cheaper way to perhaps actually create experiences that build the 21st century skills kind of nationally.
Boris, I'm going to ask the same question to you, actually, with that in mind. Is there an echo? Can you hear an echo? I apologize for that. What I wanted to ask you was, in terms of, given the experiences you've gone through, has it made you reassess your own leadership?
I mean, it's definitely challenged my own leadership and kind of forced me to build a lot more muscles. Could you elaborate maybe more on what you mean by reassess?
I mean, so the way that you used to operate pre-pandemic, has it changed? Because you lead a phenomenal organization that does impactful work in East Africa. You live in the US. And I often think in terms of these kind of moments, provide you an opportunity to reassess how you actually lead teams, lead people, lead impact, lead from the front. Has that changed?
Yeah, I think it's accelerated an existing shift that we wanted to make and we're in the process of making, which I think is a broader theme of COVID accelerates existing trends. For us, since 2013, we've really been focused on operating at scale, which is more of like, scale is more of a consolidated, kind of condensed top-down exercise, right? Because there's like a thing that you're scaling. And so we've known for a couple of years now, we've been working on how do we become a more innovative organization that's not just focused on scale. It can kind of create new, like deeply innovative things like 10 years into our existence. And so COVID has actually pushed us away. We have nothing at scale to fully kind of all new stuff. And that has inherently like pushed work down. I think I'm honestly not involved in like anything that we actually like build or do. I just kind of set the strategic context and kind of speak back to like what are the pools of like financing like want. So I don't know. I already was not involved in kind of the details of what our teams are doing. What this has done is kind of my co-founder, who has driven a lot of our, who lives in Africa, has driven a lot of our kind of program and product development, and it's actually forced her to push the development of that a level down. And Great. So we've pushed the creation a level, like 1 or 2 levels down the organization. So a bunch more people in the organization actually have now experience creating programs and products.
I asked the same question of Aashti in terms of you run a very different kind of organization. What is it that you've learned about your own leadership in these times? But also, what have you seen amongst your membership who are represented by leaders of their own organizations as to what they have experienced and how they assess their own leadership? Do you know, I mean, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, no, I think, let me start with what we've sort of heard from our members. So I think very similar to what Boris was saying, I think there was, you know, such quick and agile action from our members to respond to the needs in their local communities. There was absolutely no hesitation. And I think that's one of the real benefits of non-state organizations, is that it's a, you know, if the idea is there, then, and if there's a willingness, then they're able to deliver much more nimbly, for example, than a government might be able to. And so immediately, for example, you had United World Schools that operates in, you know, very rural parts of Myanmar, Cambodia, and Nepal, recognize that they needed to think about how to support the families in their communities by thinking about how to produce very low cost, you know, hand soap for the schools that they run. Or you had SEED, which is an organization in Nigeria, thinking about how they can innovate to deliver food aid to the schools that are part of their network. Similarly, you had Rising Academies come up with Rising on Air, which is, you know, is radio instruction, completely open source, and has really gone across, I think, 14 or 15 countries, reaching over 10 million kids. So we have seen tremendous innovation, tremendous agility from the leaders in our member organizations, and most importantly, a real desire to partner and collaborate, whether it's with other organizations, other member organizations, but most importantly with governments in the countries that they operate in. And that for me, as the leader of GSF, has been an incredible validation of the importance of network organizations. I think in the pandemic, just providing that space for people to come together, first of all, just to share the challenges that they're facing, and then to find ways to solve those challenges collaboratively, has been incredibly powerful.
I mean, so Aashti, you and I have collaborated, and Boris, you and I have collaborated to some degree this year because you won the Rubikoff Prize, of which I'm a judge. And you know, what has always impressed me is your thoughtfulness in terms of how you approach the impact that you're so seeking. But as we come out of the pandemic, the question I want to finish on is: do you see things going back to what they were? Right. So people say, you know, we shouldn't take for granted that the changes that we've seen are here to stay and so deep-rooted. Do we see ourselves going back to that reality or to something different? I start with Boris first, please.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'd say, it's like with the theme of the pandemic, my answer would probably be I don't know if we really know yet where it's going to go back and where it'll land. I think we know education will be more blended. You know, there was already moved to more blended learning. So the question is where it'll land. And then I think moments like this, and kind of looking back to like the Black Plague, like that creates broader transformation, but I don't think we really know what that transformation is. I have seen, like in Uganda recently, I think they're pushing for cell phones and mobile phones to be allowed in schools, for example, which is a step, I think, towards blended learning. So I think there will be movement across. I think for us as an organization, a big thing that we've had to do is like kind of get everyone on our team just adapt to the reality that we are never going back. This stuff we're doing is not just to kill time. This is like, we are always going to work in a blended way. And I think that we're like the goal, the opportunity of COVID is to experiment with these kind of distance learning tools. And when there's some resumption of normalcy, then you blend back and you integrate the two. And I'll say even for our organization, I don't think we know yet what that integration is going to look like. And we're actually taking next year to keep experimenting with that because we think there's going to remain uncertainty and instability in schools, in the school context. And so I'd really say we don't know. I think we're learning more about what works and what doesn't work. And I think we'll see in the next couple years, like what sticks. Like for us, for example, we just got validation on kind of phone mentorship, phone-based boot camps. Like I think that will probably be a big part of what we do moving forward. I think we're exploring right now smart feature phones, which are really interesting. Like they're like a $15 phone that does basic internet, which feels like the first kind of hardware that could be a distance learning device that is actually accessible. So I think it's all very much TBD, and I think we should, as kind of a sector, continue experimenting and rigorously seeing like what are the things that are sticking and how do we lean into that.
Wonderful. And Aashti, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with Boris that the opportunity to think about how low cost technology can benefit and be blended into more traditional modes of education has been something that we've seen, and we hope that is kind of that supports once we do go back to the new normal, whatever that is, that we see that kind of blended approach, albeit in a way that's affordable and scalable for the most marginalized kids. I think the other thing that we've seen that has been quite powerful and that we're hopeful persists is the engagement of parents, of caregivers and communities in the education process. So really, there were a couple of really amazing stories of how parents, didn't really know what their kids were learning in school previously. Kids would go to school and then they'd come home and then they'd do their homework. But what this has forced, because they're sharing handsets or using text messages, that the parents are seeing the content and kind of more engaged in the education process. And that, I think, is a really powerful lever to get families more involved and engaged in schooling and in learning. So we hope that is a way to kind of bring more wraparound educational services. And then finally, I suppose it's just wider collaboration and partnerships that we've seen emerge through the pandemic. We hope that those persist and that everyone doesn't just go back to operating in their sort of silos.
Both of you exemplify the talent that exists in the not-for-profit sector in education in such a significant way that, when people tell me actually about human talent and human capital, I point to leaders like yourselves as saying, look at the just incredible people that we have in the education sector. And so thank you so much for everything you do. And as a side note, one of my friends called Arup, actually, he's just sent me a WhatsApp, and he's obviously watching this. And he just said, Boris has such influence that he's just canceled Christmas in Southeast England. So Boris, all credit to you, my friend. Such immense influence. What I was saying is that you have such immense influence, wider than just the education sector, that you probably saved my country. So for once, you've made the right decision. And so I want to congratulate you. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I am really grateful that you took time out on a Saturday to join me here. And I wish you the very best for this holiday season and for what emerges in the next year. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.